Welcome to FitBody Lifestyle, the show where we dive deep into the world of fitness, health, business, relationships, and the art of living a balanced life. I'm Jami.
And I'm Greg, and we're here to give you the benefit of our experiences in the fitness and bodybuilding industry, the corporate world, running a business, personal development, and building healthy relationships.
Whether you're sweating it out in the gym, hustling in your business, or seeking balance in your everyday life, you're in the right place.
So lace up those sneakers and grab that water bottle, and let's get ready to transform our minds, our bodies, and our lives.
Welcome back to a special episode of FitBody Lifestyle. Wow. Get my intro together here. I'm here, of course, with my partner in crime, Greg D.
Hi.
Papa Bear. And we're here with Aimee Delgado. We're so happy to have her in the studio today.
Hey,
welcome,
everybody.
Aimee.
Hi.
We're going to talk to Aimee today about probably all kinds of things, but our subject for today is every prep is different. And Aimee, of course, being an athlete, I think probably a few people have heard of her, and
being almost in peak week in prep right now.
Yeah, 2 days from peak week.
Really?
And that's
Almost
honestly
like
what...
a week out, basically.
Yeah, well, that's honestly what triggered the concept for this thing, because we do get this, especially in contest season, in particular in contest season, and it's a question that comes up, and everybody says, well, my last prep. I mean, that's just a very common thing that we hear, and you as a coach and an athlete deal with that as well, so I thought it'd be a good topic.
Right, and Aimee's also a coach, so she's going to be able to speak to this from her own perspective as well as from her perspective with her clients. So I think this is going to be a great subject. But first, what is your check-in word, Miss Aimee?
My check-in word is present.
Ooh.
Oh, I like that a lot. Give me some of that.
I know.
Okay, awesome. Well, we're really happy to have you here. Do you want to give, a quick intro on who you are? I know we kind of already said a little bit.
Well, I'm a FitBody Fusion coach. My name's Aimee Delgado. I'm a mother, a wife, a competitor. I am super excited to be here. I'm in prep. We're literally about to be on peak week for the Pittsburgh Pro. That's my show, my favorite show. So yeah. I'm here. Hi.
Hi. That's all good.
We like that. So where do you want to start with this?
Well,
Papa Bear?
I think we should start. Let's start with today, okay? Since your check-in word is present. So we've been talking this week, and I think you have seen some changes to your body, and I know a lot of our discussions have been, well, last year at this time out, and it's the comparison game, and the comparison game is pretty normal, I guess, although it can lead to some emotional and emotional struggle, I guess, in terms
or
of
analysis
paralysis.
paralysis.
Or analysis paralysis. Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. So, Aimee, just maybe talk a little bit about how you're dealing with that in this particular prep, and then we'll go down some of the other avenues of why every prep is different.
Yeah, how I'm dealing with comparing myself to others or not doing it.
Well,
to yourself.
To yourself, yeah.
Yeah.
Like in a way, you are comparing yourself to others because you're comparing yourself to your other self.
Yeah. It's hard because you want to, when you show up looking your best at one show, you kind of want to replicate that same look going into the next show. And that's where I kind of get into my head, but that's when you have your coach there to kind of bring you back down. But sorry, my throat's a little
allergy. I know the allergies out here are terrible right now.
I just flew out to Arizona a few days ago, so I'm still getting used to the changes. But it's hard. It's hard because no prep is the exact same. It's always different. We're always battling. I feel like every single time we get through a prep, it's always something new that we have to just get over and relearn, and we just learn more. And it's hard. It is really hard, but comparing myself with others, that's something that I feel like I do really well with. I don't compare shapes. I don't compare size, that type of stuff, but more of like, oh, am I ready? Am I going to be conditioned enough? Am I going to be hard enough, or certain
am I going to have the right look?
Yes, the right look, because depending on how other girls come in, that can change the way that you can look on stage.
Although how other girls look, I mean, we really don't know how they're going to look.
Even if you see them on social media, they're not going to look like that on show day.
And on social
that's a dangerous game to compare to what you're seeing on social media, because people use filters, people are showing their best angles. It was really interesting. I actually had a client who had been sending her check-in photos to me regularly, and I thought, oh, she needs to be a little tighter. And then she showed me pictures in a different light. And I was like, holy moly, oh my God, she's too lean. I need to now start feeding her and make sure I'm, so it's really interesting how different lighting can be. And that's why you're here right now, so that I can see you in person.
Yes. Yeah, and that being a big show, we wanted to make sure that nothing was missed. And I've never gotten this experience before. Like at home, I'm focused on being a mom, getting Aria up ready for school, picking her up at 3:00. I can't schedule my gym sessions close to 3 or body work, anything like that, because I have duties. But being here, I'm able to focus on myself, and I've never done that before. So it's different. It's hard in other ways, like mentally, it's more hard, I feel like, because I'm away from the family, but it's nice to just have this time with you, and then with me, and we're learning more, and that's all we can do is keep showing up and keep learning.
Mm-hmm. It's in the corporate world, I watched a lot as data would drive decisions. And this I think plays over into the every prep is different, which is that data is data. Mm-hmm. And it helps you, but data should never make your decision. It should inform your decision. Yes. And that's the difference.
Yep.
And I do think that, it's very easy to go back to preps. And honestly, we've seen athletes who want to do this. I want to go back and repeat the same steps that I did for this prep. And then it never produces the same exact result, because it just doesn't. Your body's different, conditions are different, everything's different. So
and just like yesterday, how I woke up a pound leaner yesterday, lighter. And you were like, are you happy with that? And I'm like, I'm not very happy. But then you're like, are you worried about the scale, or is the look? And I'm like, oh, the scale's never a real thing. It's just the data. The look is what I'm not happy with. Right. And then today we woke up 3 pounds heavier, and I was like, oh, I'm so happy because I'm focused on the look, not the scale.
Right.
So like
and we did a refeed yesterday.
Yeah, a refeed, and it helps us just gather that data and know what's going on truly.
And that's it. And that, I think if there's a message for everybody, is that data is data, or data, whatever you say, data. I say data.
And I say data.
I knew you were going to start that.
It's beta,
and that's
tomato.
Okay. You want to use that data to inform yourself,
right?
To inform, okay, so that's where I was then. And it's different. It's just interesting how the body just changes. And so you can be at the same weight and have a completely different look. You can be heavier and have you can appear tighter and leaner at a heavier weight, depending on the muscle density and other factors that are affecting your look. So it is the look that we are chasing. The data, meaning the scale, past preps, all those the measurements, the body measurements, those are things that inform what we do. And I will tell you, just in watching the interplay this week, is that I think the biggest inform of what you guys are working on is your look, but also, Aimee, how you feel. What do you feel like? And I mean, yesterday we went down the rabbit hole of, is this fat or is this water? And in your skin and stuff. And so it's I think the danger with people, and they need to be aware of, is that you can go down a rabbit hole of chasing ghosts because your mind is telling you different stories than what your eyes might be telling you, or what your eyes should be telling you. So
this prep was really, really different in a lot of ways, where it was good as terms of I've never had, well, I don't know if I've had this much food this late in prep or this deep in prep, but my food was always high. My cardio has never got too high. Like everything just is always smooth sailing, and it's just keeps getting better and better every prep. So it's kind of like, I don't know. It's very different. And that's what's kind of also scary too, because it's that mental mindset of like, am I working hard enough? Am I pushing hard enough? But when you're doing the right things and you're healthy and everything's working out, it works out.
Well, one of the things that you do that I think, and you and I had talked about this, yesterday, that I think helps the process of what you're talking about right now with it getting better is that you don't go crazy rebound, after each show. So, not to say that, obviously, yes, food goes up, you gain some weight, like in an appropriate sort of way, but you're also staying conscientious, and it's not like, okay, it's not like when you're off, you're off.
Yeah, no, never off. I get uncomfortable if I fall off because it's not who I am, honestly. It's like I'm an athlete. That's in my blood. I've been an athlete my entire life, so it's just that's where it's never going to change.
So when we talk about each prep being different and each peak being different, one of the things I was asked in a recent podcast interview that I did, somebody asked me about, like, what do you do if somebody starts their menstrual cycle during peak week? And you're kind of notorious for this.
Yes.
And I actually, gave the example of that first show where you actually did, and he assumed that you didn't win. And I'm like, no, she won. I mean, just because she started her period didn't mean that it all was lost.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of an interesting perspective that he had coming in, that just that assumption that, oh my God, if that happens, then it's all over. So I think it would be kind of cool to hear you talk about some of your experiences, either with, sometimes we've had, PMS during peak week, I had a menstrual cycle, like either starting on that day or during the week, or talk a little bit about that.
That's funny how you're saying I'm notorious for it, because I am. My predictions for this Pittsburgh Pro would be my period would start May 6th to the 10th, and I compete on the 11th. And take me back last year to my second time earning my Pittsburgh Pro champion title. I was on my period during that week. So coming full circle a year later, it's the same timeline with my cycle. So there I'm very healthy, as you can tell. But no, it's not a challenge anymore. It's always in the back of my head. It's a thought, like what can happen, because you never know what's going to happen. But I never think twice about it anymore, just because of the experiences that I've had. Is okay, if I'm looking a little bit watery, just either take a Midol pill where it has a little bit of a diuretic in it and then not enough to like really do anything, like pull water out of the muscle, or pull a little bit of water, pull a little of sodium. It's not like that big of a deal unless you're having like serious cramps. But we've regulated my period to a really good spot. So in the beginning, it was like that. In Legions, it was pretty intense where we had to take a diuretic, and now we don't usually have to, but we have to make sure I'm staying nice and tight the whole week going into peak week. We usually don't back off from a lot of, well, no, we do back off from cardio, just steps. We keep them in.
Yeah. Just some movement.
Just for movement. Yeah.
Just a movement. Well, which, I think that's another interesting point, kind of going back to you not letting the swings go too far and too fast. Like when you do gain weight in your improvement season, it's kind of like a nice steady, and I do think that that's part of the reason that your cycles are so really regulated.
My body understands, like when I'm reverse dieting and dieting into prep, my macros don't get low. I make sure they get high, but without gaining too much body fat. We have to wait for my metabolism to catch up before increasing my food each week. So if I wait for my metabolism, I'm not gaining as much body fat, and we're able to continue pushing that food up and up and up. And this this transition from Arnold's to
not much of an off season
to Pittsburgh, our carbs were around 400, and going into Arnold's, they were around 600, carbing up into Arnold's. So that's really it. Is just making sure that you're having a good coming off the off season, coming into prep, going into off season. That's really important. Mm-hmm. Both of those are really important, because if you're coming into off season and you have such low calories, if you're coming into prep and you have such low calories and you're already at 20 minutes cardio, it's gonna not do well towards the ends of prep. You're gonna be not feeling good. Yeah. So you got to take care of those.
And that's why a lot of athletes go into shows just so depleted, because they are on the limited calories and high cardio. And so I go back to the Legion show, and I just will never forget, because since we're talking about that show, when you walked in, I will just never forget, you walked into the room, put your bags on, and said, "So I have some news. I started my period. And the thing that I really, and I've told this story 100 times, and so it probably changes a little bit every time I tell it because
it's like a tall tale, it keeps growing.
Different memory. Yeah, but this is accurate. I think the reason it changes just because I go back to it. It takes me right back to your mindset and your attitude about that, which I do think played a huge role in that.
In your success,
Aimee, is that you were calm. And in fact, the thing that you said to us was, do you remember what you said?
I think I said I get to see what happens or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. It was like another piece of data that we get to accumulate, to figure that out. And we've been at shows recently where we had an athlete who had her cycle the week, during peak week, I think like 2 or 3 days before the show. And you could tell that it just affected them mentally. And you think about cortisol and how that affects your body, your look in particular. And if you're stressing about your cycle and you're telling, it's not going to help your cycle. It's going to compound whatever effects that the body has hormonally on it, because cortisol is a hormone. So it's going to impact that. And it just is amazing how much the simple things, the things that we don't always acknowledge, because I think we think there's a better solution instead of doing the simple thing. But your attitude going into Legions and, your attitude going into Pittsburgh. And I do think that the reason you put such a great package on stage at Pittsburgh was because you were able to deal with that. You had already assimilated that mindset of everything's going to be okay. I'm going to get through this.
Yeah, I had no control over if I was going to start it or not. That's my body's choice. And so I know that. And by me knowing that, I either get to decide, am I going to sabotage myself and feel bad or down or like, what am I going to do? I can't do anything about it. Or am I going to go let my coaches know and say, hey, let's figure this out together,
And I do think that's something, because I know some athletes will think, well, I'm just going to start birth control or manipulate my hormones so that I don't have a cycle if I think I'm going to have one. And I will tell you that
it's another variable.
You're robbing Peter to pay Paul. You're going to say, okay, I'm going to stop my body from doing what it naturally wants to do in order to overlay this other hormonal profile that can have who knows what that's going to do. And I go from having a situation that, okay, I should be able to deal with, to a situation that, man, now I have no idea.
When I first got with Mama Bear, I was on the depot shot and I did not have a period ever. And I was on that for 3 years straight after I gave birth, 3 years straight. And never had a period. And then she's like, maybe we should get off and we should figure out where you're at, like, your own hormones. And I was like, okay. So I got off and never been on it since. And now my period's so regular. And my body has reached homeostasis at the level of leanness that I'm at, even no matter what phase I'm in my preps. My body understands how to regulate and stay healthy. And so it's amazing.
Yeah, we've seen a number of athletes, and every prep is different. Every body is different.
Everybody's different.
And so, we've seen people come off birth control, and I mean, we have one that came off birth control and literally in 3 weeks they had a cycle. And then other people who came off birth control and it takes 4 to 6 to 7 months of doing other things to get that cycle back. And it's not, it's like when you go into a doctor and they tell you, well, how am I going to recover from this? And they're going to tell you the bandwidth, but I know there's some people that are on the short end of that, some people that are on the long end of that. And it's hard because, again, in this, every prep is different. I think the biggest thing, if there's a message about this, is that it creates an expectation of how things are going to go. And I go with my quote from the Buddha here, which is expectations. The stress occurs in the gap between your expectations and your reality. Yep. And the greater that gap, the greater the stress. And then the rest of the quote goes on to, so accept everything and expect nothing. And when you can get into that mindset, man, it just is so liberating and freeing. Right.
Yeah. And you can always get there. Like whenever I first started with Jami, I wasn't getting my period every month, even in preps. We didn't get my period until Legions, and that was 2024, 2023.
I think 2023. Yeah, it was 2023, yes.
2023. So we started together in 2021. And
so it took a little while.
Yeah. So in our first prep, like I didn't get my period for about 4 months, and then it went 3 months, and then it went from 3 months to literally a month, and then 2 weeks, and then now it's during prep. So, and that's that trend that you're seeing.
Monthly now.
Monthly. Yeah. Now it's monthly, no matter what, like literally no matter what. And that's just from us getting blood work every few months and regulating what I need and learning my body, me learning my body, her learning it with me, and understanding what it needs through the phases. And then we're able to just have a super healthy body in all the phases.
Yeah, I think this comes down to really controlling the controllables.
Yes, what you can, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, something you and I have talked a lot about, and, in every prep, in every peak, we can only control what we can control.
Yeah.
And sometimes the body's going to want to do something different than it's done before. And that's why it is different each time. It's like it's different from person to person, but even within the same individual, the body may be responding one way at one point, and then it may shift. It could have to do with age, it could have to do with stress, it could have to do, with environmental, all of those things. And then, also controlling the controllables when it comes to peak week into stage, because my gosh, I know we talked about this after the Arnold, the lights and how close the judges were to the stage. Mm-hmm. I know this past weekend there was 2 pro shows that were going on that had very different lighting. Mm-hmm. The athletes showed up very different. I think you ended up with
very different venues.
Different venues. I think you ended up with one show going with a little bit harder physiques, and then the other show going with a little softer physiques, because of all of the factors that are out of our control. So it's going to be interesting for the show you have coming up, because typically we know the venue, we know the lights, we know all those things, but it's now moved, which is what happened last weekend too. It's now moved to a different venue. We don't really know exactly how it's going to be laid out, what the lighting's going to look like. It's just kind of interesting, because I do think that, it's something that people, especially if they're newer to the sport and, haven't been doing this for so long, they don't
know how to strategize for it.
Right. Right. And, they don't know that, like, at the end of the day, like, you just have to go out there and do your best and be your best and let the cards fall where they may, because there are going to be some uncontrolled.
Boom.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah,
exactly. Let's pause on that, because I do think, there's a strategy going into every show.
Yeah.
I also think that the athlete's ability to do what my Marines would say, adapt, improvise, and overcome, be agile, be resilient, recognize that, hey, I'm going to do my best. I don't care what the conditions are. I'm just going to go out there and perform. That mindset really, instead of, you go on stage, the stage is different, the carpet's different, you're sticking, whatever. And if you let that get in your head, it's going to reflect how you pose. It's going to reflect how you present, because you're going to be thinking about that instead of, hey, I'm here to put on a show. I'm here to perform. I'm a professional athlete.
And it all goes back to, gaining that experience and learning from it, and then taking those tools to create a system in place for the next time. So like, just like how when I got my period for the first time, I was like, I want to have a good attitude and feel good about this, so I don't make it worse, so we can tackle this and know how to handle it. Therefore, whenever it happens again, we know exactly what to do, and there won't be that stress. And if I were to stress out, it would have been a lot worse. And then say my period comes again, we're not going to really know how to handle it 100% to know exactly what's going to fix that, whatever's going on.
I agree.
Yeah.
And one of the things too, I was thinking about as thinking about this conversation is, I feel like because the body's always changing and because things are, it's really about making a decision, seeing how that decision reflects in the physique, and then making the next decision.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Each time, we're doing check-ins right now. It's like, okay, are we a little bit flat right now? Do we need a little bit more food? Let's see how that affects. Okay, we like that. Do we need, and being willing to, go in with that curious mindset.
Yeah.
And being willing to sometimes, try something different, seeing whether it's
do something different.
Okay. Do something different. Yeah. You got me, Papa Bear got me. And then see if something works. And I do think that, that same kind of mindset that you're talking about, like being willing to come in with that curious mindset.
And that attitude of not being like, oh my God, this is what if I gain, or what if this happens? Yeah, exactly. Because I knew if I had a refeed, I would gain or probably lose, but I don't know. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to figure it out. We're going to see what happens the next day.
We know what the science says.
Yeah.
But what we don't know is how your body is going to respond to that science.
Exactly.
And so we make a reasoned decision. And it was funny. I was going back. We talk about this all the time about certainty of decision making. Mm-hmm. And Colin Powell, one of my favorite people in all of history, he has this formula: P equals 40 to 70. Probability of success when you have 40 to 70% of the information you need, mm-hmm. make that decision. And I do think that you see that in our sport a lot, is that, people want the certainty of 100%. Well, no decision is 100%. That doesn't happen.
It's always, it depends. And it
is.
Literally.
And I would say in our sport is probably P equals 50-50, meaning that we have 50% of the information, meaning we know what should happen when we introduce that variable. Yeah. And the other 50% is we don't know how your body is going to necessarily respond at that given moment. Yeah. So we have to pull the trigger at some point. We have to do something. Sometimes it's do nothing and we wait. Sometimes it's, hey, let's introduce something else, and we see how that affects your body.
And this is also where being coachable comes in.
I like that.
Talk about that, Aimee.
Yeah. Be willing to understand what you're going through, and not some people, I feel like some people can be in denial, or, but you really just have to take a step back and say, you hired a coach for a reason, and they're credible, what they're doing on stage with their athletes. And Jami's obviously the best bikini coach out there. So yes, definitely. So you just have to, trust your coach and work with them, and don't fight them. That's what's hard. And we've worked so well together with me telling her what I feel, and she never questions me. She always listens to me. And that's what's most important, is listening, and truly active listening and responding, and just giving each other that respect.
I love that you brought that up, because it absolutely is a two-way street. And I say this frequently if I'm doing a consultation and I'm talking about whether or not I'm going to work with somebody, is, I want to know that they're going to communicate with me, because I'm only as good a coach as the information I'm given. So, yep. and you and I have learned this lesson together throughout the time we've been working together. Yeah. You've learned how to inform me better. You know what I mean? I've been able to figure out more how to interpret, the communication, and then be able to give you back what you need. Yeah. And it is very much about, like you said, active listening, being willing to share, and be I think, you said it perfectly. Being coachable is not about just sitting back and going, okay, and just doing it. It's about asking questions if you don't understand something. It's about, explaining something that maybe the coach isn't seeing or doesn't know.
Collaborative effort. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's huge. It's really huge. It's what's made us where we are today.
Yeah.
And being so calm through all the phases that I'm going through it doesn't make it stressful, because I trust her and I know she trusts me. So that's where new things pop up. I feel bad inside. I feel because I care so much about the sport, I care if I do well. I have high expectations for myself. So that doesn't feel good. But at the same time, I know I'm going to be okay, just because we have what we have.
Interested in changing your life or stepping on stage? Join FitBody Fusion today.
Experience the FitBody Fusion difference with tools, knowledge, and community support to reach your healthy and sustainable lifestyle.
We guide thousands on their fitness journeys, from seasoned athletes to those who are simply seeking a healthier life.
Our expert coaches provide personalized plans and unwavering support, empowering you to thrive.
FitBody Fusion is more than just training. It's a community. We understand the challenges of solo fitness journeys, which is why we foster a supportive environment where members encourage and motivate each other.
Join the FitBody Fusion community today and unlock your full potential.
Head to fitbodyfusion.com to sign up for a free consultation.
And do it today. So there's another aspect of this that I think we should talk about in terms of every prep is different, which is the after action of what happens. And in this again, wrapping around all the things that we're talking about, the principles, the mindset, we recognize that no decision is 100%, no matter how confident we are in the result. It's just not 100%. And I do think after a show, it's very easy there's a difference between going after a show and saying, okay, these are the decisions that were made. And we had good reasons for making those decisions. And if we were to do it again, maybe we would do it a little bit different. There's a difference between doing that and saying that was a mistake, that was a mistake, that was a mistake. And I see people do this all the time. And I'm not saying that that there can't be mistakes.
I do that at times too.
I've seen you do it, Aimee. That's why. Yeah. And I know. And it's so. And I think in the moment when you're emotional,
it's in the moment. Yes,
sure.
it's when you're feeling the lows. The lows are really low. The highs can be high, but the lows are hard. And that emotional. That's what I'm still working through as an athlete and a competitor, and as a coach. Dealing with those emotions in real time.
Yep.
That's where it's the most difficult. Looking back, it's easy for me to understand how I could have gone better, what I shouldn't have freaked out about. But it's a learning lesson. It is hard, and what we do it's very hard.
Yeah.
And it's go ahead, babe.
Well, I was just going to say, in each time we make a call, it's there is no ABC, right or wrong. As we're having this conversation, I'm thinking about the posing choice that we made going into the Arnold, where we had you sit into your hip a little bit more in the front pose. And it was kind of one of those things where we were like, we really like it. And we were like, okay, we really like it. So we're going to go for it. And it bit us in the butt. So, sometimes those calls work and sometimes they don't, and it could be, sometimes it's the lineup. You know what I mean? Like, had you been up there with maybe, some people that had a little bit more of that roundness from the front pose, it wouldn't have looked like so much. But you know what I mean? Each time we have to make a decision and we have to go for it and then course correct. But it is hard because then the after action, then it's like that kind of beating yourself up. I mean, me as a coach and I know you as an athlete, like, why did we, gosh, that wasn't the right decision in this particular case, Well,
that's where I'm going to disagree. I don't know that it was. I don't know.
It didn't work to our advantage.
There you go. And after the fact, I don't.
And it could have in different circumstances, and that's why it wasn't a mistake. And that's where
that's right.
It can be hard.
It's the difference between calling something a mistake and calling it okay. The next time, given these circumstances, I would go a different direction.
Yeah.
That's okay. Where you say that something was a mistake, it implies that when you made that decision, you did so foolishly, or you did so out of emotion, or you did so out of things that would have likely produced a bad decision.
Yeah.
And that's the difference that I think is so key with people, is that a decision does not become a mistake if the outcome doesn't work to your advantage. A decision is only a mistake if, when the time you made it, you should have done additional work, you should have done additional research, you should have looked at something you didn't. That's I'm fine with that. That can be a mistake, and that can be something that can be corrected. But if you had the right reasons for making a decision, you went through all the areas of review, and you looked at the things that you should have looked at, and you make a call. It's a judgment call. It doesn't make it a bad decision, nor does it make it a mistake just because the outcome didn't work to your advantage.
Yeah.
Because the certainty of that decision is never certain. I don't care how good we are. There's nothing in life is certain. There's no such thing as a sure thing.
Well, especially in a subjective sport, because
there you
it
go.
is in the eye of the beholder, and some of the judges like that, and some of the judges don't like that, and so it's where we have to appeal to the majority, and that particular panel, if it didn't appeal to the majority, it doesn't go our way. So
and all we can do is strategize for each show, and that's what we did. We did our strategy, and it didn't work out exactly to our plan, but
we learned.
It worked. It still. We looked great.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that should be about what bodybuilding is about. Did I put the best package I could possibly put on stage? And then the old adage here is really, I think about this a lot. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn.
Yep.
And not you lose. If you learn from what you did, then, and I think about the front pose and the sitting into the hip and stuff. Okay, so we learned a lesson there. We've learned lessons every time we've gone to Road to the Olympia that, we're applying for. We've learned every time.
Yeah. Well, and this is kind of an interesting thing, like on the subject of every time the prep is different, right? So when we went to the Olympia, we didn't have quite as much muscle density because we were being careful not to be overly dense, right? And then we kind of undershot the mark. So when we came to the Arnold, we had really pushed for density, which is where sitting in the hip then looked like we had a little bit too much glute, right? So, and that's where like, that is where like, as the body is changing and evolving, certain calls that we make also, you know, can change and evolve with it. And I think about, you know, the problem that some of the judges had was that they felt like it made the glute to leg balance look a little bit off because your glute looked a little bit more dominant. Yeah. So now we've put on a little bit more muscle in the legs. We've been focusing on making sure that we're creating a little bit more balance. Yeah. So then the question goes, okay, now do we stay completely out of the hip now that you know what I mean? Yeah. So this is where this subject comes in so much because it's like we can't go, okay, you know, this worked this time, but now we've you know, resolved some imbalances, or we brought up a little bit of density in the physique. Now the posing has to now maybe shift a little bit. So this is such a complex sport, and because it is subjective, and it is, you know, like who you're next to can change the look very much and everything else. I think this is an interesting subject, so people know like the kind of complexity that goes into the decisions that we make.
Yeah, and you never know how you're truly going to look, like how full, how round, how bubbly, how dense you're going to look, because the final look is the final look on stage, where that pump up, that last meal, the last sodium, the filling out to the max, like she's not even going to see it until I step on stage. So like, it's truly, because I don't pump up before I go backstage, you know, and at these big shows, she's not able to be back there with me. So she's checking me before I pump up, and then we're going out there and we're doing what we planned. So like, that's a variable that's also tricky too. Because every show I look either a little bit fuller or have more roundness or more upper glute. Like I said, every prep is different.
Is different. Yeah. And wrapping something else into that is you never really know how you're going to look until you're standing next to other athletes.
That too.
So and that's something you're never ever going to be able to control. And so
you never know what athlete's going to be on or off. You can look at a sheet and be like, okay, here's the top girls that I would assume that's going to be in the top callouts based on history. But then again, it can change up, and you're like, oh, okay, I was definitely not right.
Right. Maybe the person you thought was going to be up towards the top and you're battling out with, maybe they came in off. So now all of a sudden, you know, I had an interesting situation. I just last Aimee person who won Wasatch Warrior that after your championship,
keeping it in the family.
Yes. So, you know, last year Aimee had almost like a little bit of a glute, little bit, I don't want to say dominance, but a little bit bigger glutes, like they were kind of around squaring out a little bit. So we were very careful not to let her push back. Whereas this year, we've really worked on that balance. We are so much more balanced. And it was interesting because she came out on the stage, was posing like we did last year without. Yeah. And so I'm texting. She didn't have her phone backstage. I'm like, I need you to, you know what I mean? It was funny. Because Jordan had her phone. I'm like, telling me that, you know. So it's kind of interesting because this is just there are a myriad of different examples that we could talk about that as the body changes and evolves, and as we continue to work on imbalances, like, you know, sometimes we're compensating for something, you know, and the other interesting thing is, you know, and I see this a lot, and I'm sure with you coaching your athletes that come in that have a good amount of body fat to lose, we don't know what they're going to look like when we pull that off.
Yeah, that's like sometimes whenever I'll have athletes that come from a big off season or a long off season, or maybe they don't want to compete for a couple of years, and then they're like, well, I want to compete. And I'm like, okay, well, we got to get, you know, this much weight off. And then when we're halfway there and we still don't see the density in or any tie-ins yet, they're like, how much longer? I'm like, I'm guessing about 10 to 12 pounds, but I really don't know because I can't see how much muscle you got under there until we get get closer. And once we get closer, I'll let you know.
Exactly. Well, I think of one of the amateur athletes I had that this past year, who, when she came, you know, we had she had beautiful shape. We had a good amount to drop, and the way people carry their body fat, she carried most of it on the glutes. So I thought there was going to be more tissue there than there was once we dieted her down. Oh yeah. So we dieted her down, and I'm like, oh my gosh, now we need more glute tissue. She still did really well, but then we had to then kind of shift gears and go back to building because, you know, and so that's interesting too.
And even that intramuscular fat, where some athletes have, like, I don't have much of it, right? I don't have a whole lot of intramuscular fat,
Right.
Where some athletes really do, and then that's where it can give the look of the glutes being bigger and dense, but then it's not. It's body fat, and so they look kind of squishy, and yeah, so that's also a factor too that can make an athlete look like they have more than what they truly,
I like that you brought that up, because it's really interesting. There's a athlete that I had that competed this past weekend that's very much in that kind of category, and it was hard to explain to her and have her understand what that is, because the shape is there.
Yeah.
But then if we get lean enough, we lose the shape, because like you said, there's that intramuscular fat that it starts to kind of then look flat. There's just not that like 3D pop to the
pop.
muscle.
It's like the pop, the density pop.
Yeah.
What's the difference between having a pump and no pump, almost, in that sense? Is that, you have, when you have fluid in the tissue or sarcoplasmic growth with just a bunch of fluid in there, versus the myofibrillar growth, which is the density, which is the tearing and the formation of the new tissue. So
exactly.
And there's one other variable that we can throw in here, which I think is very, as we talked about the Olympia last year, which is judges' feedback and chasing the judges' feedback.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
And I mean that which absolutely creates expectations in a prep, and again, why every prep is different. And we have seen this time and time again is, athletes will get feedback after. Aimee, you got feedback last year after, and we felt like we were on track for what the feedback was.
Yeah.
And then we get to the Olympia, and the feedback changed that week in terms of what they wanted to see, and B, just, we were just not dense enough at that show. And we felt going into that, at least maybe a couple weeks out, that we were on track with what the judges wanted to see.
Yep.
And then it turns out we weren't.
And part of that was there was a very different lineup.
Different lineup.
We were being compared to a lot harder physiques instead of a lot softer physiques that we were the year prior. So so it is a moving target.
It makes it really difficult for an athlete, and that's why, if you're listening to this and you're saying, okay, well, what do I take out of this other than every prep is different? Well, if you take out of this that every prep is different, you're on the right track. The second part that I would say is that manage the expectations and what you're doing, have a plan, and stick to the plan. There's no plan is perfect. My favorite saying, which is no plan survives first contact. And the first contact you're going to have is the day of the show. That's first contact. And oh God, you show up and you thought that the plan was going into this because of the feedback and everything else. Hey, we're going to deliver a harder physique, a little bit more etched, a little bit more lean than we were before. And you show up and oh my God, everybody else is softer and fuller.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we had a plan, and you never know, by the way, how that plan may play out in that particular show. Maybe the judges like that, maybe they don't. Maybe because everybody, you're the odd person out. They want to see that softer, fuller look, and that may be the result of the judging. It doesn't mean your plan sucked. It doesn't mean that you didn't do the right thing. It doesn't mean it was a mistake. It just means that how everybody showed up in that show, in that particular judging panel. And oh, by the way, if the judging panel is different than the judging panel that gave you the feedback that told you to be harder and sharper, is not the same judging panel at the next show. So that's another variable. That should be reflected in your strategy. But
yeah, definitely. And that's what we do every show.
It
We
is.
just try, we do our best, and we're doing a great job. I mean, we're always up there. We're always, literally battling it out. So I know we're on the right track. It's just, it'll come.
Yeah.
Our day will come for sure.
Yeah, I want to just play off of your comment about the judges' feedback too, because I've had this coming up quite a bit lately too, and it's just kind of encouraging people to ask more questions and get more clarity around feedback, because I do think sometimes there's misinterpretation in feedback. I know that it's happened to me, it's happened to us. So a lot of times it's just like getting that clarity around specifically what they mean. My favorite example, because I see this one come up so much when I'm seeing athletes get feedback, is when the judges say tighter. They don't always mean leaner. Sometimes they want to see everything look tighter and in an individual.
More separation, right?
Right. And it might mean they need more muscle
To gain that separation.
Right.
As if they were to get leaner, they would just look
flat
and
or
too
stringy.
conditioned and
Or they'll lose like their shape, because if they don't have enough muscle, they're going to just start losing shape at that point.
Yeah.
So I think that that's something, if you're getting feedback and you're not 100% sure, like just asking that question. And then also, I did want to add one other thing. Sometimes the judges don't know the answer to that question. And I know it's always funny when Sandy will go, I don't know, you're the coach, you figure it out, you know, like all I can tell you is what I'm seeing or what I'm not seeing. And to your point, like that might be like, I want to see more separation. I don't know how you're going to get to that. Although sometimes judges will tell you how to get that. They may or may not really know because they're not coaching that physique or they aren't that, you know what I mean? So I think it really is important to know that they can only judge what's visible to them. They don't know what's actually going on behind the scenes, because I'll have somebody who was strided to all heck till I filled them out, and then they're like, oh, tighter, and I'm like, no, I mean,
there's nothing left to give. And that's harder for bikini because the structures are so different. And like for me, like I have a certain structure. Well, I don't have I have a lot of muscle, but there's a lot of girls that have a lot more muscle than I do, but I can look bigger than them only because of my structure alone, you know? So that's probably where the judges can have a hard time knowing if this athlete, because they might have the same amount of muscle than the athlete sitting next to them, but they have a smaller frame or a bigger frame, you know? So that looks different. Yeah.
No, I like that you brought that up, because like when you're talking about that, like a great way to put this is that clavicle structure. So the width between your shoulders, which is truly just how your body is built. So if we have somebody who's got a narrow clavicle structure, they need a bit more muscle on their shoulders and on their back to give the illusion that they've got a little bit more width. Whereas if you get too much muscle up top, then you start looking just massive up there. Yeah. Not because you are bigger, but just like you said,
it's a sportive illusion.
Right.
When people see me in person, they always say like, wow, your glutes are huge, that type of thing. But like with my upper body, they're always like, wow, you are so tiny. I did not expect you to be this tiny and not looking so muscly and so dense and big, because like other girls look very hard and dense, like just walking around. But me, I look very petite and tiny, but that's just because it's my bone structure. Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead.
Right. No, I was just going to say also like how much the kind of the roundness of the muscles too, because, you know, everybody's
genetically.
Yeah. So, you know, like when Greg was talking about the myofibril, the density versus the sarcoplasmic, some people's muscles, you know, when they fill out just get really full and round and bubbly.
I have myofibril, right?
Yeah. You have both, but you do get that great sarcoplasmic pump. Like your body pumps very easily. So that's the thing, is like looking at you, you know, when you're just standing normal versus after we pump up to walk on stage.
Especially when I pose, I look a lot bigger than I do in anywhere else.
Right.
Like Sandy's always said, remember in the past because I've gotten feedback in the past, last Arnold's, my shoulders were a little too big, but they're like, standing here, like I remember Tyler and Sandy were like, standing here, you look fine and normal, but when you're on stage and you're posing, it's completely different. So it's definitely a structure thing.
I think about us being in Vegas recently, and Thais Capelli, our wellness pro, was there, and everybody was saying, "Oh, Aimee's calves were like a wellness pro, or Aimee's quads were like an wellness pro." So we put you guys right next to each other. It was like, okay, and this really validates that whole concept that this is a sport of illusion, and what appears on stage is going to be different. But B, it also shows that who else is standing next to you can make you look, but she made you look teeny, which you are teeny.
She made me look teeny, and I felt like at the Arnold's I looked a little too big.
Right?
You know what I mean?
It's just
because of
who you were
the
standing next to.
individuals.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So
I know that's what I tell people, you know, what like, you know, stage weight is, and then what it's visible to, you know, it's just so different, two completely different things. And even when I was competing, I remember, you know, people, oh my God, you're huge. If they had never met me, they had only seen pictures of me on stage, and then they would meet me. It was the same thing. And they're like, oh, okay, I'm like 120 pounds, you know what I mean? But they, you know, they're thinking I'm just massive. But like Greg said, that's what the illusion of bodybuilding is all about, you know. So
and this is it's the weird thing. And we've talked about this before, but it's the push and pull of comparison. This is a comparison sport. You are compared against other people on stage, and you need to leave that for the stage, and just leave and for the judges. That's right. When you do the comparison game afterwards, and you know, comparing yourself, comparing yourself to other athletes, comparing yourself to other athletes on social media, and having no idea of the lighting or or whether that photo was even a current photo. You know, it's not like they're taking a picture with a
and the difference in photos, like we've talked about, like, and you know, I know we're kind of coming up on time, but I did want to just say, like, I mean, we do after action reviews after every single weekend, all the shows that we're at with our coaches, because it's all about, you know, us learning and growing and things like that. And it's really interesting when you're the coach on site that saw it in person, and then you're looking at the photos, and
it's very different.
Yeah,
it's different. It is very different.
Yeah,
photos can make you look harder, bigger, leaner, all of it.
Yeah,
depends on the lighting.
Yeah, we were doing a fit model one just recently, and the photographer had put a filter on it that made the athlete look so much harder than she actually did in person, because we had photos, you know, that we had taken, and like, okay, this is what it actually looked like. And then because people were like, oh my God, did they want fit model that hard? And we're like, no, this is what it actually looked like. And I mean, this is still a photo, but you know, at least you kind of get, you know, a contrast. So I do think it's really, when people are only gauging what the judges were seeing off of photos and not ever seeing things live, a lot of times they're missing the whole picture.
Reality.
Yeah, the reality. That's a good way to put it. So I do think if people are wanting to learn and grow in the sport, they need to go to shows and watch them in person.
Yeah, there's the show, like if you're in bikini, there's a show almost every other weekend.
All the friggin' time,
Yeah, and it should be somewhere in your area where you can drive at least an hour or 2 hours to max. Should be.
Yeah, and I feel like in the bigger the show, the better you're going to be able to understand and learn. Just because if there's, you know, if it's a really small show, there's only a couple of bodies, they're going to pick the best of the athletes that are there, but you're not going to get a good sense of like what the ideal is there. But, and I'm talking more about the amateur shows, but if you're able to go to like a bigger,
like with the pro stage on
pro stage or even a national, like the national shows are fantastic, you know, because you get so many athletes there and you get to see like, you know, what's the trends? What are they picking? And, you know, I think it's a great way to learn. And I feel like what makes us better as coaches is that showing up, that consistently showing up and consistently having conversations with the judges, looking at what they're picking, looking at what's on stage, watching how things are evolving, because they do evolve.
You got to study the sport, man. There's so much that goes into it. And it's not just about the coaching part. It's the criteria, the judges, the stage, all the, like everything else is its own thing to learn. So it's a lot.
Yeah. But it makes it fun. It makes it fun. It makes it challenging.
Well,
it's like a puzzle.
Something.
Listen, it makes it fun. It makes it a challenge, and it's not for the faint of heart. And we know what we got into when we signed up for it. So it's like, you know, people who I would not ask for people's sympathy, empathy, or anything on this, is that this is a hard sport. It's a very, very hard sport.
And I love it because it's hard.
Yeah, yeah. And what in life that's worth pursuing isn't hard. If stuff, I think people, you know, there's this expectation that people want easy, and I understand why. Man, I like easy too. I like to win too. Who doesn't like to win? These are table stake things. But if you truly want to progress in this sport, you truly want to evolve, then like, comment, and subscribe, and leave a review on that. Yeah, thank you, babe. And also just recognize that you got to build up that learning mindset, that curiosity. You've got to be willing to take your lumps. And you know, that there's that quote from Michael Jordan, famous basketball player. I talk sports ball. Jami, I think, knows who Michael Jordan is. I want to make sure. But anyway,
if you're listening and not watching, I'm rolling my eyes as hard as I possibly can.
He talks about how many missed shots he had and about how all the failures along the way. People look at the victories, but he had far more failures than he did victories. He's remembered as one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest of all time. But you remember him for that because he kept pushing through the failure. Yeah. And that's how this works. And so, you know, as an athlete in this sport, you have got to be willing to push through the failure, push through and push through the adversity, push through the disappointments, the expectations that are not met, the things that don't seem fair, all those things. You got to keep pushing through those things in order to reach whatever pinnacle you're going to reach. It may not be the one you thought you were going to reach. But it may be something entirely more or bigger.
Yeah. In this sport, it's not always fun. That's one. I love this sport so much, but there's a lot of times where I'm like, this is not fun, but just because it's so hard and I care so much about it. And so the pressure that I put on my own self is another story. But yeah, it's hard, but I love it.
And Aimee, you are a mother, and motherhood is not all fun.
Oh yeah,
And we're going to talk about that more.
That's
in another episode.
That's what I was going to.
Yeah,
that's exactly where I was going with that. Is that I know you kicked me, so nobody else saw that, but she kicked me under the off camera. You did, and that's okay because she was kicking me like that's the next episode that we're going to talk about. It's like, yes, I know it's the next episode, which is we will be joined by Miss Aimee Delgado, and she's going to talk a little bit about the struggles of motherhood and coaching and being an athlete and being a daughter and being a human being and all those things that
juggling
that
it all.
with. Yeah, they're all the balls are in the air and they're all on fire.
Love that.
You want to talk about how people get a hold of you?
Get a hold of me?
Yeah.
Yes. So you can reach me for coaching, fitbodyfusion.com. Request Aimee Delgado and Christian Delgado as your coach to have a consult. And you can also find me on social media at Fitness by Ames on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and I think it's called X now, not Twitter.
That's correct.
X, and it's all the platforms. I'm on all of them at Fitness by Ames. Yeah.
And your checkout word for the day.
Checkout word is excited.
All right. I like that.
Love it.
And I'm excited.
Well, hopefully this has been, I know we kind of went a lot of different directions in this episode, but I think it was all like really great information and hopefully helping people to really kind of understand more of the behind the scenes and, how things do change from one prep to the next and, being able to go with the flow.
And again, the takeaways from this, that just every prep is different. I mean, it's really in the title of the episode, is that just recognize that things are going to be different and look at the data for sure and manage your expectation around that to recognize that your body's different, the situation's different, conditions are different. If nothing else, like if you're looking at a prep a year ago, being a year older, that adds up.
Being a year older and hopefully
wiser,
gain some muscle and all those
that
things.
too. Yeah. And so Aimee's checkout word was excited. And if you want to be excited, then like, comment, subscribe, leave your review. And remember the 3 B's.
Be good to yourself.
Be good to each other.
And be
safe. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to FitBody Lifestyle. We hope today's episode has left you feeling motivated and equipped to tackle your fitness goals, business challenges, and the daily dance of life. Remember to value progress over perfection. Life's tough enough alone. Find the chosen family around you to help you along the way.
If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite streaming platform. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at FitBody Fusion.